Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, a show at the intersection of technology and strategy. On this show, we interview industry leaders and experts to better understand how they think about strategy during this time of exponential progress.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Point of No Return podcast. On today's show, I spoke with Geneviève Bégin, co-founder and CEO of Pop-Up Camp. Geneviève is a really interesting entrepreneur. She has an eclectic background, moving from the world of art to the world of business and thinking about social entrepreneurship. She's a businesswoman, mother, an artist. She's a graduate of l'École supérieure d'art et de design de Orléans. She has an MBA. And in 2015, she co-founded Pop-Up Camp, which is a mobile childcare center, essentially providing childcare solutions on the go. In 2017, the magazine Urbania identified her as one of the 50 personalities who does the extraordinary in Quebec. And she also received the Emerging Entrepreneur Award in C2 Montreal. We had a really good conversation where we spoke about how she moved from the world of art to business and what she learned along the way, the importance of selling in art and in startups, her passion for female entrepreneurship, how her startup is thinking about daycare in a very different manner. And we dug into, how she thinks about her strategy, how she prioritizes not just her business, but also her life. She really is, I think, a special entrepreneur trying to engender real social change. She's deeply passionate about social issues and has a really interesting background, like I said. I learned a lot, and I think that you'll enjoy the conversation. Geneviève, thanks for being on the show.
Hey.
I'd like to ask you first a kind of general question. How'd you move from the art world to the entrepreneurship world?
Well, I went on the dark side, for sure, for some of my artist friends when I went to HSA. But I decided to study business because I wanted to have tools and to feel more accurate when I had business instincts, and also to have management tools for project management. Managing a team is something, but knowing how to do it is different. Mm-hmm. I always had an entrepreneurship project. I worked as an independent worker as a photographer, but I knew that I could do better.
Did you learn anything in the art world that you think is super applicable in the business world, or that most people don't necessarily have a reflex?
Well, when you think of selling, the image is key. So if you know how to manage image, you have an instinct for what's different, for what's creative. And for sure, my tools of graphism, Photoshop and all that were very useful. But creativity as a whole, I think is not that different from the creativity you need in business, actually.
Yeah, it's actually a good point. I find sometimes people conflate creativity. Like, you can be a financial analyst and be super creative, even though you're working with numbers. It's the same sort of thinking sometimes that applies. So I'd love to talk about your current project / startup, Pop-Up Camp, which seems to be getting more and more traction. So maybe if you could quickly introduce it and explain what it is.
Yes, so Pop-Up Camp is now a low-tech company. What we do is we take care of children in events. We take the childcare wherever it's needed, when it's needed. So it's like catering, but of a childcare. So we started in a startup weekend with a technological idea from the needs that I had, taking my daughter with me at the MBA as a student. And I suggested the idea. I met my business partner on that weekend, and we realized, though, that the technological components were not the key in all that. It was really taking care of the children and making sure that security was the priority. That was what the parents and the event organizers would need. So we shifted, and we decided we would do normal childcare with tailored activities tailored to the topic of what would happen for the grown-ups with the children on site. And we started only with my daughter's toys and colorful carpets from her room, and my partner and I were the only two people that took care of the kids. And then we quickly needed to hire, and we had a diversity of clients who needed our service. And now we have about 30 people on call that are making the childcare service mostly at night and on weekends in Montreal area.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think the first time I hear of this service, I don't have kids yet, so I find it a very interesting business model. What was the hardest thing to start? Was it getting, let's say, the approval, the license? I have a friend that runs a daycare and like the government is pretty intense. Or was it gaining first customers? What was the hardest thing to start?
Gaining customers, definitely, because as a childcare, we're not garderie, which is a word protected by the Ministère de la Famille in Quebec. But so they're not. We don't need any license, but we don't have any recognition at the same time. So one of the thing that was very important was to get an insurance for liability, and it took us 3 months to get that. So we couldn't really start before we had the approval of the insurance. And when we had that, we were really happy, and some clients started to agree to consider our project even for a longer term relationship. And there is no such thing as a childcare when you organize an event and the possibilities. So you have a budget for food, for a place for a venue, even sometimes for people who would put the car away in the parking lot, but you don't have any budget for the kids. So I have to arrive with a lot of example of how it's needed and determination to convince the event organizers that they would make a difference and it's something that would be needed.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's not like a pre-existing checkbox that says, here's the child care line item, right?
Working on that, but yeah.
Well, maybe to ask you a question then before Pop-Up Camp, what led you to wanting to start a company, not necessarily Pop-Up Camp, but what was the internal drive or motivation?
I was an independent worker as a photographer and a photography set assistant. But in art school, they taught us to do art and think about it and philosophy and all that, but never selling. So I tried to sell what I had to sell, but it was also myself that I was selling. It was really hard. And I didn't feel like I was doing my best because I didn't know from where to start and what selling was about. So that's also why I went to business school. And I also didn't want to work alone. I was interested in having a business that would be organized around a system more than just an independent worker that would execute whatever they think they can do. So it was something that was on my mind when I went to school. And when I finished the MBA, the MBA is not built for entrepreneurs, but I think it's the good side. It's the good thing about MBA is that it's not meant for entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are people who make links between things that are not meant to be linked. And that's where they create real value. So if you go study real hardcore business and you understand finances, then you can be creative, as we said earlier in that podcast. So that's where the need started. And I also wanted to manage bigger projects. And I had professional path that was not straight and regular, and so it's you don't necessarily pop up in an HR department as the best person. When you get an interview, it's good because you get to be somebody more interesting than the regular people. But you have to get there. So the best way to make to be recognized is also to create your own path, which was something really interesting in entrepreneurship for me.
Yeah. And it seems like you've been delving into the entrepreneurship / innovation industry for a while. And you're also, from what I understand, a recent board appointment for the Innovation District of Montreal. Can you speak about that a little bit and explain what that is?
Yes, Innovation District started with 2 universities, ETS and McGill, who wanted to have a physical area recognized for innovation, and also link better university knowledge and business needs and opportunities, and also have a voice for the question of innovation, because when you group, you're stronger in a way. It started a few years ago, but it got really serious about 3 years ago. And it's in the southwest of Montreal, mostly, just by the side of the downtown area. a lot of things are happening. They're transforming the old planetarium into a hub. That's an ETS project.
It's part of Centec, I think, right?
It's linked to Centec, yes, but it's going to be way more complex and fun than just Centec. They're working with urbanism projects, with Maison de l'Innovation Sociale is going to be there also in a few weeks. They're having a lab. It's the first time that you can have a lab with living individual experimenting technologies with Ericsson and Videotron, and making sure that they have 5G covering a specific area, and also sensors in some of the students' units. So it's also a place where things will happen. We're not just talking about it. So that's the technological approach of innovation. We often merge the two words, but I sit on that board with the vision of social impact and social innovation, because Pop-Up Camp is not, as I said, a technological solution, but it does change a lot of things for a lot of people. And in that perspective, they acknowledged that they needed to open a little bit more to social innovation. That's what I hope will happen also.
So they weren't looking just for technologists to tell them about the latest and greatest, let's say, protocols and aspects that the tech they can use. They're looking for someone that can bring value from a different perspective, from the social change perspective.
Definitely, and they understand that having a whole neighborhood that is called innovative, is more complex than having technological solution. You have to think of the people who live there and cooperate.
Yeah, so solving something more important than 140 characters, essentially.
Well, technology is sometimes the thing that is different, but it's also just a support for the different idea. But you have to have that idea before.
Yeah, I agree. We also spoke about, right before we started, another subject that you're passionate about. I think you recently came back from an overseas trip talking about female entrepreneurship. So I'm curious how you're involved, the background, why you're passionate about that topic.
I think that entrepreneurship is always something hard and very interesting, but men and women come from different culture, I would say. We have a different way to raise kids as little girls and little boys, and we have sometimes different ambition when we're girls and boys, and so I think that the goal can be the same, but we have different paths, and it's important to consider those paths as opportunities and obstacles. So if we talk about women entrepreneurship, if we want to support women being more involved in either technological or non-technological entrepreneurship, we have to give them the tools to do so. I went to Romania in the context of Organisation de la Francophonie, where they wanted to have case studies to discuss the tool of entrepreneurship to support the economic autonomy of women. They think that it's a good leverage to do so. I really agree. And I think the obstacles are the same worldwide. It's access to money. It's access to knowledge. It's the feeling of being able to do it, which is not always the same thing as real access to knowledge. And challenges with managing the household and the project at the same time. But when you say that to somebody who comes from country of Africa, where there is only 10% of women who can access internet, and in the same country it's about 50% of men, you can understand that the access to technology and knowledge is a big challenge. Here we can access classes online, and a lot of startups startup owner that I know that are working in the field of education base their project on technologies. But when you talk about women entrepreneurs who want to learn, it's way more basic than that in Africa. But if we can get that technology to them, it means a lot. So one of the possibilities with Francophonie is to get those technologies, but we have to understand the real needs. And sometimes it doesn't go through the means, but let's see. So the discussion we had there was, how can we empower women better? I think it's very important. And I think that women are natural entrepreneurs in order to survive. In a lot of contexts, they would sell food to get to others in the market to get food for their own children, but they often spend the money at night that they collected during the day, and they don't really see it as a system. As I wanted to create my own business as a system, but I started also with that idea of doing what I can, what I know that I can do. So being organized in a network is something that would be very interesting for those women. I think that's what the Francophonie could do, and making technology and knowledge accessible is also something very important. And we discussed that over 2 days. A lot of ideas came out. I'm looking forward to see them happen.
That's really inspiring. I have to say, I feel the reasons you go into, there's some of your reasons, so access to capital, knowledge, and then potentially, you said the feeling, like, which is, I guess, imposed cultural norms to a certain extent as well.
In French, it's syndrome d'imposteur. How we do say?
Yeah, imposter syndrome.
Syndrome. Yeah.
Which ones do you feel are the most easy to knock down? Like I look at capital, for instance. I don't know if you know this company called Kiva, for instance. It's like online lending. Like you give like micropayments, and oftentimes it's women entrepreneurs that you give online, and like it really seems to be working.
Yeah.
What do you think is the roadblock, the first roadblock to come down?
In their context, if I think of some of the women that I met, they were not working in what we call economy. They were on the black side of economy because they didn't gave any taxes and collected any goods from the government also, and didn't have any structure. So I would say that microcredit is a very good solution because it can reach those people that are really at the base of what economy is about. But if you don't have an account, you can hardly put your account online in order to get some money. So it's really from the community. So how can we have one person that is able to reach out from the community and bring it down the access to some microcredit, and for the women to have also a system that would create value for a longer term. So I personally like the tax system that we have, and technology is thinking in a different way what the fintech, what finances can be about. And I think that the fintech could make a real big difference in Africa in that perspective. And the question of how can we have the women accessing the normal economy would be a great thing to think about. It's not just capital as a big possibility to invest in big technologies, and it's really more at the basics of that. It's being recognized for what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to go back to talk about Pop-Up Camp, because I imagine this is your full-time job and you kind of spend a lot of time. What would you say are the biggest challenges that you're facing right now with your company?
After 3 years, we're still a startup because a lot of people didn't heard of us, and there is still not that checkbox. We have growth challenges because people are asking for what we do, but we have 30 people that can deliver. Sometimes we would need to have 45, so we have to hire very quickly, and that's great, but it's a bit stressful for my team and I. Access to capital is always something also, because you're good, but you're not good enough. And I think that will be scalable at some point. My idea is to create franchise or license and spread like that through Canada. But right now I'm not ready to do so. So I'm not, capital ready. I have an image, I have some drive, but, well, I haven't found the angel yet that would be interested in that. And, So capital also. And, but I would say that it's really the people I work with that are very important in what we build and what we create. I had a business partner. She decided to buy her way out because she had a kid, and for her it was too stressful to stay as an entrepreneur with the debt that we need to cultivate, let's say, and the challenges of not having any regular revenues, because I still pay my employees about 5, 6, 7 times more than I pay myself. So that is a huge challenge when you have the responsibility of a new baby. My daughter is already 6 years old, so I'm a bit more comfortable with that level of stress, but she wasn't. So that's another challenge that Pop-Up Camp is having right now. We're rebuilding the team to organize our priorities better and deliver.
And what's the unit economic model? I know you make money per event, but is it a custom charge every single time, or is it number of, let's say, educators or I'm not sure what the right word is, but intervenants, people that come on site? How do you charge exactly?
So we charge by the amount of kit that we can receive, accommodate. So it's for the duration of the event. Sometimes it's 2 hours, sometimes it's a deal of 40 hours. With the town hall, for instance, it's a deal for the whole year, for all the monthly event where you can ask the mayor a question. So it's small moments, but recurring events. So that's the best deal for us. We would come often on site, but it's one deal around, so we don't know the context. Yeah. So it's the event organizers who takes the fees, and it increases with the amount of kids that we'll receive and the duration. The parents sometimes do pay. Most of the time they don't. Depends of what our client, which is the event organizer, will need. But in the context of the city, for instance, they want to make sure that accessibility is obvious, so they don't want the parents to pay. We were providers of C2 Montreal. For them, all the rest of the activities are something you would pay for. You pay for your food, so why wouldn't you pay for your childcare? So in that context, they ask the parents to pay per hour for their kids. It's wide possibilities.
Yeah. Have you ever considered or toyed with the idea of moving beyond daycare and looking at babysitting, for instance, as an avenue? Or is that out of scope, you think, as to what you're trying to solve?
I think we do create more value for the children because babysitting is is a field where there's a lot of people who work. You have a lot of different kind of quality of work, and you're fighting against others. Yeah. And I wouldn't let go of the idea of having fun activities and special activities for the kids. I mean, they can't do more than being princesses and superheroes. So they need to have those ideas coming to them. So if I would do some babysitting, and something would be missing. And we have that challenges of creating something where people would think differently. So if we start doing babysitting, which is what is currently available, we won't create any value in having things on site, because people will not make the difference as easily. So far we don't. I say that if we would diversify, we would probably take the activities that we developed already and do them in schools or in other day camp in the summer, things like that.
Because I'm hearing your story, and it sounds eerily similar to how Airbnb started. So I don't know if you remember the inception story. So their initial idea, which is totally not the idea today, was to to basically satisfy people when they come in for conferences. So large scale events offer, let's say, supplemental capacity in people's homes. So sleeping on air beds, on air mattresses. And so their idea was like, let's go find all the conferences where people sleep. And like their first big success was the Democratic National Convention in 2008. But then what happens when that convention is finished, right? Demand evaporates, right? So I'm thinking of very similar lines as to what you want to do. There's obviously very specific demand at a certain time of the year for events, but then there's always on demand, which is like, babysitting, or like you said, schools.
Yes, but babysitters, when you need them, it's because you're going somewhere. Yeah. So you may be going to the cinema or we're going to do our first contract with theater in a few weeks, and I will be able to mention it when it's done. But I think that we have to flip the perspective of the parent having to figure out the solution by himself. I mean, we're a society, and we think about, if you're hungry, I will provide you some food when you come. Well, if you need the childcare, I will provide it to you too. So why not? And it's very interesting. I would love to be like Airbnb, a great success, and probably that the angels would be more interested in me in that context. But we started a little bit like that, actually. We did the other way around. We wanted to do a Uber. Okay, 3 years ago, Uber idea was more different than what we can hear now, that everything is a Uber of something. It was a Uber of childcare. And we thought, if I know that my neighbor is having a childcare provider already, a babysitter in her house, I would just share. It would be easier. We get one person to organize, and we share the cost, and that's great. But we figured out having a map of little girls of 12 years old alone at home was not that safe, and security is a priority for a parent. So maybe there is something else to think about in that perspective. And also I think that we socially evolve in what we want for our kids and how we can make sure of that security, as Uber at first had that challenge of security also. So am I getting in a car of somebody who can be very dangerous for me? And I think that now with the reviews and all that, they calm down a little bit the stress that people would have around security. So maybe we could put something like that online. Why not? But in the meantime, I mean, the challenge with being an entrepreneur is that you have so many ideas and you have to focus. Wow, I wish I had so much energy that I could just, charge USB like this while I'm talking to you, and then I can go out and do another kind of project.
Yeah. So then, which is the good next question, how you set priorities? How do you decide what's important for your company?
Priorities to me are set in a broader perspective than, my business, because I have my personal life. And when you're an entrepreneur, you don't always make a difference. Well, you never make a difference between your personal life and your professional projects. So I would say that I think first of what's business and Geneviève wise, and mother and Leanne, which is my daughter, wise. So when I get home, I usually put my phone down. I don't have a fixed phone, and I don't want to have one because I don't want anybody to reach me. It's my time for her. And when I'm with my daughter and I do my things with her, I don't think about my job. And if I do so, I just write it down somewhere so I can forget about it. And when I'm at work, I try to do it 100% also and to focus. So I often do a lot of lists, and to check the boxes is really something that is great, because as an entrepreneur, you always see what you can do better and what you can do next. And you often forget what you just did as something that is finished and rewarding. So it's something that is great. I also employed a personal assistant half-time. And so all the technologies are great, but human relationships are also what drives me. And I need somebody to tell me, okay, you have an appointment at this time and this time, and don't forget that thing. And here's your paper. And, it's not a mother, but almost, that helped me organize in that way. So I gave her, at first it was 10 hours and 15 hours, and now we're to 20 hours. To me, it's the definition of success. It's not money. It's not fame. It's a personal assistant. So I'm getting there slowly but surely. And that's a good way to organize and prioritize. And I have my involvement with the board, with every project, with women entrepreneurship support. And sometimes I have to say no, and I should, according to some of my mentors, say no more often. But being surrounded with mentors, with helpers, with lists, with all that I build, it's the best way to go through and to prioritize. And the bottom line is the social impact and the financial impact for my business all the time. But sometimes it's the big challenge. Now it's easier after 3 years because I've done a lot of events, so I don't need to do events just to prove that I can. But I had some clients like that at first, but now it's no longer a way to choose my clients and possibilities.
What does that current checklist look like today? What are the top 2-3 things that you have on there?
To say yes, I want to work with a client.
No, your current priorities, like the current things that you need to kind of hammer out, let's say, for the next few months.
I met a lot of people in the past 3 years. Now I need to do a lot of follow-ups with those people. So it's easy to connect the dots one time, but now I need to knit the dots. So that's my first priority, I would say. My second priority is to think how we're going to expand and continue to create value. So we have a current model, but it doesn't scale fast enough for me. So I have to think and put in action and validate what I think could be a better way to do some piggyback on events, projects. And I was thinking of licensing and stuff like that. So it's something that I need to focus on, because otherwise I won't survive financially if I grow and I always have as much cost as I have opportunities. And those are great, big, huge goals, I think, for us. Yeah,
no, definitely some big ones. Maybe to talk about your industry, how do you see your industry changing over the next few years?
When I arrived in that field, nobody really did what I did. You had entertainers who could also take care of children, so I found like 3 websites that were 2 years old, people that could say they could do mobile childcare. Now we have competitors in the West Island who does also a day camp and 0 to 5-year-old childcare. we have, I would say, competitor in Saguenay. I think we inspired to start their business, so I'm really happy for that. But I would like to have more competitors because we have to open that field and get that checkbox on the lists of everybody, you know. At the same time, I think that in the context of the city of Montreal, it's a great place to be now. It was harder 3 years ago because nobody really asked for it. But now with the fact that we've been working with the town for a year and a half, and we're in some of the arrondissements, and I hope we can get more arrondissements, and we can make sure that civic participation is at the heart of a lot of organization. It's a great momentum. So the industry of event is evolving. The industry of civic participation is evolving, and we're just in the middle of both. And education is also something that is in the conversations right now. So if we can bring the light on what we do with the children as an opportunity for them to be educated or at least tickled by something different, I think it's something great that we can use to make Pop-Up Camp a good solution.
Yeah, you hit upon a few points I find really interesting. How, you know, it's the concept of a rising tide floats all boats, right? So the notion of competition right now is actually not that accurate for you. You actually need more competitors to open up the market, right? So ideas, for instance, like, you know, open sourcing all your business plans, right? Like putting it out there for the world to see and allow, let's say, you know, smart competitors in Saguenay to pop up, for instance. Mm-hmm. There's quite a few ideas that I'm sure you could probably play with to, like, how do we the demand is there, in instance, from the parents, but you need to build a mechanism essentially to satisfy it. What do you think is happening in the space that no one's talking about? Yeah.
Well, a field that nobody talks about is, a lot of people are big fans of corporate social responsibility and sustainable development, but, you know, it's great as long as nobody spends for it. And now we have to make decisions, as we see that a lot of scientists publish that Earth is gonna crash. You know,
it's exploding.
Basically, it's exploding. So how can we really make a difference? I try to make a real difference with people, but are people really uncomfortable enough to pay? So how can we make that a burning platform for change to happen and come? Because, you know, I come with a project of $1,000 sometimes for an event of $100,000, and they're like, it might be too expensive. Yeah, really, guys, come on. You know, you say you want to do something, just do it. So how can we turn words into action? That's something that we don't talk about that often, I think. Oh, we talk about it too much. We don't make it happen enough.
All talk, no action. That's a very good way. Maybe to be respectful of your time, Geneviève, ask you one last question. Where can people find out more about Pop-Up Camp or about any of your projects?
So we have a website, popupcamp.com. Our Facebook is more active because, as everybody else in entrepreneurship, we're always making a new website, and our new website should be out in a few months. We're working on that. So you have my LinkedIn, Geneviève Bégin. You can contact me through that, or popupcamp.com. Yes, and my email, also jen.bégin@popupcamp.com.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Never miss an episode by clicking on the subscribe button on iTunes or Google Play.